That's what the HVAC system needs to address. That's what we were worried about spreading around the building, is the droplet nuclei. So these are these small infectious aerosols that the ASHRAE paper is about. These are droplets that are exhaled from an infected person. They are smaller than 10 microns. The problem is that they are extremely light, and so they will stay airborne and infectious longer and travel farther. The way this works is when I exhale, COVID-19 is a protein, and it's surrounded by moisture that comes from my respiratory system. And if, as that's leaving my body and it gets in the air and it dries out, the moisture evaporates, then you've got the droplet nuclei, which is extremely light, which can be spread easily and distributed around the building. So that's kind of NIH's definition of infectious aerosol and droplet nuclei, smaller than 10 micron, and when the moisture content around the virus, the bacteria, or the protein evaporates. So NIH has also determined that there's biological plausibility of aerosol transmission for SARS, coronavirus, norovirus, mycobacterium tuberculosis, influenza, and Ebola. And this is what the HVAC mask is here to prevent, the transmission of these things right here. So COVID-19 is the hot topic, but this is something that's not a knee-jerk reaction for Aircuity. This is a message that we've been promoting for 10 years now. 20 years now, since we've developed our first air monitoring systems, and you know, have been big into the marketplace. So the reason it's incredibly poignant right now is we're wrestling with the challenge of getting people back to school and back to work. So it's like, okay, I've got the problem. I've got to do two things now. I've got to not only mitigate the risk, as what we're going to talk about, but almost equally as important, we need to communicate what we're doing in these buildings, so that, you know, in your case, students and faculty and staff will understand, okay, I have a greater level of confidence about coming back into that building. And here's why. You know, they're telling me that I can simply look at my cell phone and see that these conditions are being met. And here's what the university is doing to ensure that I have maximum healthiest possible conditions inside the building. So mitigate the risk, and equally as important, communicate what in the world you're doing. All right, so looking at that first tenet, the ASHRAE position document, as well as all other industry experts, you know, are clearly stating that higher ventilation will reduce the risk of spreading virus and bacteria around a building. And that's quite simply because you're relieving the maximum amount of air from the building and returning less air to the building, right? It makes perfect sense. And they further go on to say that DOAS systems, dedicated outside air systems that are delivering 100% outside air, are preferable. A lot of benefits to these type of systems. You know, you're decoupling your thermal, your heating and cooling from your ventilation load. So this allows for, you know, decentralized mechanical or passive ventilation to be available. You can potentially have heat recovery, but the key is that you've got 100% outside air delivery and 100% relieved air from the building. So good, right? That's great. But if you're not designing a new building right now, you know, what are they talking about in your existing buildings at the university? So what they're talking about is they're talking about more economizer, maximum economizer. The ASHRAE position document is, wow, it's almost surprising in what they're describing, where they're basically saying you need to open your outside air dampers 100%. Just as an explanation for anybody who's on the call that's not completely familiar with how an economizer would work, an airside economizer. The way your air handler works right now, you're returning air, and most buildings are returning about 80 or 90% of the air back to the building. If you were to go into full economizer, you would close these dampers right here, and you would completely open your outside air dampers. And in that case, you're bringing in a system that is designed with both the filtration and the cooling and heating to be recirculating about 80 or so % of the air, meaning, you know, about 80% of the air on a 95 humid degree day from in the summertime is coming back at not 95, it's coming back at, you know, in the high 70s with moderate humidity. It's now saying, hey, I'm going to bring in 100% of this really hot, humid, or cold, dry, whatever that air is through this, right? So holy cow, the challenges are massive. I mean, first of all, cost, for sure, but system capacity is really the one that we want to look at. In the wintertime, when the spread of many of these is the worst, are you able to humidify? Are you able to keep up with keeping the building at proper humidity levels? On poor air quality days, are you bringing in too many dusts and allergens and smokes? And I know we've seen times at Penn where we see effluent from the refineries coming to our supplier references. So the question is not okay, shut these all the way, open these outside air dampers all the way, but what is the right level? Like, what is, not for energy, but for health and safety, what's the maximum amount of air I can bring in and not overwhelm my system is really the question. So the end result, right, that we're trying to achieve is not dumping maximum air in the building. The end result we're trying to achieve with this statement is effective ventilation per person. It's ventilation performance per person that we want to get. So what we're trying to do is deliver clean, healthy, correctly humidified air, and not just dumping ventilation into the building, right? And per person. And remember, for the foreseeable future, it's entirely possible that in fact, 100% possible, I think, that your occupant density is going to be different. It's going to be a lot lighter, right? So we're basically trying to say, okay, you've got this almost insurmountable challenge of the ASHRAE recommendation saying open your dampers 100%. Your system likely can't do that. It can't do that and keep up with the heating and cooling and the humidification and possibly the filtration, right? So how can I have a data-driven approach so that I know that I'm delivering effective ventilation per person? And how can I validate that I'm doing this correctly? Like, in other words, what is the level that I open these dampers at and close these dampers at? What data can I use to determine this, right? So, all right, so this is the first look into the Aircuity system and how exactly we're going to help accommodate this challenge presented by ASHRAE. And it is simple. You would go to myaircuity.com and you would put in your username and password. And as soon as you do, it's going to come to this screen for your building, and you likely have the ability to hit a drop down and see all of Penn's buildings. When you're at this screen, you're going to see categories, parameters, and details. You're going to simply go to the categories and click on comfort. You're going to go into parameters and you're going to click on calculated enthalpy. And so what we're doing is the Acuity system is measuring the temperature and the dew point in the return air and the supply air. And just as a quick reminder to everybody, the biggest benefit of the Acuity system is we're a life cycle solution. These aren't sensors that were put in your building 11 years ago or something and have no idea what the condition of them are. They are continually swapped. They are extremely high grade. We have the ability to continually watch them and monitor their performance. And we're using true differential sensing, which eliminates any errors in what the signal is. So you've got exactly accurate information in these sensors to calculate a calculated enthalpy number. So what the system does here, when you log in and you click that, and you're then going to click on, under the details, you want to look at any of them that are out of range. So the system is going to scan every air handler in the building, and it immediately tells you, in this case, bravo, no exceptions. Every one of your air handlers is in the range of calculated enthalpy that's permissible for that system. Have at it. You can increase that enthalpy, you can increase that outside air damper position as much as you want. Your system is operating perfectly fine at those levels. Now you can start increasing those levels to drive to the margins of what that system can do. So furthermore, now if you want to see like what are those levels that I can get to, when you logged on, instead of going under categories and parameters and details, you would go up to the top and you click on G&E. G&E is graphing and exporting. This is now looking at the raw data of the calculated enthalpy for all the air handlers in that building. And when you click on that, you're going to take a closer look. There's drop downs up here to select all your different point types that are available. In this case, we want to look at the calculated enthalpy. We're going to look at all, in this case, there were 11 air handlers, all 11 air handlers. And then we set it over whatever date range we want. In this case, we set the date range back over 2 weeks. And then it's very easy to see over that time period, but not just in this immediate condition, what my calculated enthalpy was. Did it stay inside a range that is acceptable? Am I doing full economizer and everything's okay? Or am I past the limits of my economizer and I need to look at other strategies to effectively achieve this ventilation per person? Furthermore, we also have a strategy that would remove the programmer from this. So this is something that the analytics tool can help you with, but it's really an integration issue, right? There are times, certainly, when the full dampers are not the best answer to get ASHRAE's end result of effective ventilation per person. And so we also then take a differential energy calculation in looking at outside air, return air, supply air, and doing a calculation to determine which one has the lowest energy. And with these thresholds set properly, it has the ability to do economizer lockout, where however it was programmed, the Acuity system will say, no, we need to stop the economizer at this point because the conditions are just completely out of the realm. We will never be able to maintain the temp and humidity in the building. So, again, use all the data and analytics to maximize the amount of economizing you can do based on extremely accurate information, but then also have the ability to have the economizer lockout function to prevent when it just should not be. All right, so in summarizing, ASHRAE is coming back and saying, go at it, full economizer, this is the only acceptable thing to do. You've got serious system capacity issues to think about in the winter, especially when the spread is the worst. Can you keep humidification? Can you keep your building from getting too dry? And I'll talk in real good detail about that in a second. Filtration, bad air quality days. The question is, at what level of outside air can you run and achieve this verifiable outcome that they're asking you to do? And so the analytic tool to have the insight and intelligence to do that. Aircuity we will have available a recorded webinar from Dr. Stephanie Taylor. She was a graduate of Harvard Medical School and then worked as a physician for several decades, then went and got her master's in architecture and infection control certification, and since has published extensively in a lot of peer-reviewed journals. Her statement is, a way better solution than 100% outside air is measuring and control of the relative humidity in the space. A way better solution to minimizing the spread of infection, to be clear. And here's why. We talked about this droplet nuclei. The droplet nuclei, I exhale. The COVID-19 protein is surrounded by moisture from my respiratory system. That leaves my body, and I'm in an extremely dry condition. It's a very arid condition. I've gone ahead and I've opened up my dampers, and it's low humidity outside, and it's dry inside. It makes it much easier for the moisture to evaporate around that particle, that infectious particle. That makes it not only, it increases the viability of the particle, but it also keeps the weight of that particle much lighter, drops below 10 microns, becomes a droplet nuclei, and is easily spread around the building. In addition, immunobiologists have pretty much clarified that your immune system works significantly worse below 40% RH. And that really has to do with the function of your mucous membranes. So again, extremely important to keep that relative humidity never below 40%, ideally, stuck right at 50% if possible. So anyway, we can also now use our analytics tool to make sure we are achieving that. So now we're not looking at the air handlers. We're going to look down in the rooms of the building, and I need to say, okay, in 20 seconds, I need to know if there's any rooms that are too dry that I need to humidify. Do I have any problems in terms of infectious rooms? Go to myaircuity.com, put in your password. As I said, you'll come to this screen. Under the categories, comfort, under the parameters, calculated RH. Under calculated RH, click and see what's out of range. It's going to scan every single room in the building, and it's going to tell me my driest to my least driest rooms, my most arid rooms. So I want to see my worst ones. I'm going to click on more. That'll take me right to the very last page. And here I go. I'm going to look right here, and I'm going to see, in this particular case, room 152 is the driest. It's only achieving 29% max to relative humidity. That room, I need to humidify in that room. That's the fix, right? And or any others that are below that 40%. So it took me 20 seconds maximum. Log in, click those 3 parameters. I'll immediately have a list of which rooms are too dry and subsequently are my most infectious. To further dig into what could be the fix for that room, I'm going to click on that number 152 that I saw right there on that screen. And now it's going to take me to the trended data of that room. In this case, I'm looking back over a week. I can set that to whatever time frame I want. here on my min and max thresholds, I can see that that room is running below those thresholds consistently over time, validating that that room is infectious. I need to fix that room. Whatever I am doing with my outside air, it's not achieving the end result of effective ventilation per person in that room. So then I can also then go back to the air handler level. Same thing. All I did was I went to graphing and exporting, and all I did was I put in the air handlers and the calculated relative humidity. And I'm looking and I'm saying, in this case, my outside air is getting extremely humid. It's getting, 95% relative humidity. And I can see that the discharge air, I'm sorry. In this case, it's a separate case where I'm looking at the air handlers, I'm saying it's getting extremely humid outside. But that in these rooms, my relative humidity is staying in my correct range. Therefore, it's not a function of humidification from the air handlers. Or conversely, they are dropped out of that range, and yeah, it's a function of the humidification at the air handler level. So use the Aircuity analytics tool to very, very quickly look at the exact humidification of every room and compare that to the exact humidification discharging from the air handler. Again, any questions you want, put in chat. I'm glad to answer them at the end. So now I'm going to introduce Brent Cornwall from Aircuity's Client Services. He's going to talk about how you're going to use the Aircuity analytics tool and look at the TVOCs in your building. This is framed within the context of the ASHRAE document, as well as all industry experts are absolutely verifying what we know, and that is post-COVID, it's going to require significant cleaning and disinfection of numerous different surfaces in your buildings, and increasing both the strength and the frequency of this. TVOC is going to be a problem. Brent's going to explain to us how we use the analytics tool to mitigate that problem. Take it away, Brent.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everybody. So as Tom mentioned, an increase in cleaning products and disinfectants is going to be a big factor for TVOC's production in your spaces, especially in office environments where TVOCs weren't an issue pre-COVID. But yeah, we're going to need to implement a proper disinfection or infection control plan where you're cleaning surfaces such as door handles, handrails, light switches, shared keyboards, water fountains, and just like anything else that's commonly touched surface, community surface. So yeah, this can result in a significant increase in TVOCs in your building. And these TVOCs cause things like headache, nausea, irritation of the eyes, nose, or throat. And possibly the worst offender is that these TVOCs can be a pathway for infection, which is obviously, as this ASHRAE Position paper is stated, we want to reduce those pathways for infection. Yeah, so let's take a look at two examples. This first one's going to be an example of a commercial office building, and we're going to take a look at where spiking TVOCs can be a cause of concern in a building. So again, it's a quick dashboard lookup. We could go to the IEQ parameters, the TVOC sensors, and then we could take a look at cases where the thresholds exceeded. In this case, our worst offender is that top ranked room there, 4965 South. And we could dive in a little deeper at the graph of what's going on in this room and where this spike occurred. So as we can see here, this is a pretty significant spike of 13 ppm of TVOCs. This spike is significant because in that space, you can start seeing those symptoms that I mentioned, as well as it could just be really unsafe to stay at that levels for any length of time. Fortunately, we only see this spike last for less than an hour, so it could have just been cleaning supplies getting, for example, close to our sensor or something like that. So it was cleaned out very quickly by the clean supply air from that building. It would be a cause of concern if this was lasting for multiple hours or multiple different days at similar level spikes. You might want to change cleaning regimen or like cleaning supply, what's in your cleaning supplies essentially. So change up your cleaning supply products. So the next example though, we'll take a look at maybe how Aircuity can do a better job of smart monitoring your system and controlling the air going into the space. Again, we'll look at the dashboard. This is a critical space, so they're using our DCV commands to control air based on TVOC levels. So again, we'll look at the dashboard to find our worst offending rooms, and then we could dive a little bit deeper. So it's as simple as IEQ. This time we'll look at their TVOC sensors and find our worst offending rooms, threshold exceeded. We'll take a look at room 323, and instead of just clicking on it, I want to see how our DCV signal is responding. So we're going to go to graphing and exporting. And on the top graph here, this is our signal that we send to the BAS system, graphed on top in air change rates. So how many times the air changes over in that room per hour. And then on the bottom, it's the PID TVOC sensor. And we can see with the blue line is the supply air going into that room. And the black line is the TVOC levels in the space itself. So when there's a differential, a greater differential, as it gets closer to 1 ppm, that's when you'll see it go into max air changing. Our max air change suggestion, which is 16 ACH. So you can see the second spike gets closer to that 1 ppm range, and our signal is suggesting 16 air changes in the space, in which case it drops off that spike significantly. But again, it looks like there was some cleaning or something happening in the space to create longer elevated levels of TVOCs, which causes our system again to suggest elevated levels of air changes and clean out that space and return it to healthy and safe levels of TVOCs, people relatively quickly.
Thanks, Brent. So, in summary, the way I see this is elevator buttons, doorknobs, drinking fountains, the coffee pot handle. There's going to be so much increased cleaning and frequency of cleaning that there's going to be elevated levels of TVOC in the building. So it's, what do you do? With no data, it is, I gotta conform to that guideline and throw my dampers in as wide open as possible. But am I over humidifying and creating a worse condition? It's like, how do I balance this out? So the data, it's just a really quick way to do two things. It is, you can look and rank immediately the rooms and say, those are my 5 dirtiest, or those are the 5 that I need to figure out what to do. And is that change the cleaning products? Is it change it to clean at a different time of day? Whatever that is, there's changes that can be made that maybe are not ventilation, or, in that case, it's ventilation, right? So that's number one. And then number two, my occupants can look on their cell phone or look on myaircuity.com and be very comfortable that the space that they're studying in and working in is as healthy as can be. Thanks, Brent. So next we're going to have Anthony Bias from Aircuity's Client Services is going to talk about the third, I guess we're on the fourth, whatever the next tenet of the ASHRAE document, which is, hey, you've got to increase your filtration significantly. Okay, so there's challenges with that. So how do I make sure that I am doing this correctly? So Anthony Bias, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Why don't we go ahead and dive right in. So in the first example we're going to show, what we've done is we have gone and we've navigated to the My Aircuity dashboard, and we're looking at the IEQ section, and we're taking a look at the rooms that have seen increased particle levels. And as you can see, there were several rooms that saw some increased particle spikes. So now what we want to do is we want to investigate whether or not these spikes are due to an IEQ event taking place in the room itself, or if the increase is due to something else, such as a rise in the outdoor air particulate levels. So basically, in other words, we're checking the building's ability to filter the outside air. And we're going to be asking, is the amount of outside air being brought in exceeding what the HVAC system's filtration ability is? Or do perhaps the filters that are installed need to be fixed or upgraded? And so the first step is to take a look at our outdoor air particulate levels. And so what we've done is we've gone into graphing and exporting. We've graphed those particle levels of the 3 outdoor air sensors that we have at this site. And what we can see is that there was a distinct increase in those outdoor air particle levels up to about 4 million particles per cubic foot. And that can be a pretty common occurrence at most sites around the country. So now what we want to do is we want to graph the rooms in question to see if their increases in particles correspond with that rise in the outdoor air. And so when we graph those 3 rooms with the highest particle spikes, we see 2 things. Not only do we see that the IEQ events in each of those rooms don't coincide with that rise in the outdoor air particle levels, but when that rise in the outside air does occur, there's no increase in the particle levels in the rooms themselves. So what this is showing us is that the building's maintaining proper filtration, and that if we have the capacity to increase the airflow from the outside air, we can do so without impacting the health of the building occupants. And this information, it's easily obtained. It took us 30 seconds to just click through on the dashboard and in graphing and exporting, and we can provide that to the building occupants via this Aircuity platform. And however, if our get back to work or get back to school strategy was to increase the outside air coming into the building, this is something we're going to monitor very closely as we increase that outdoor air, because as soon as we start to see any rises in the outside air and we see that correlate in the rooms itself, we're going to know we've reached the capacity of our filtration and that we don't want to start bringing in any more outside air. So now, in our next example, once again, we've gone back to the My Aircuity dashboard, and once again, we're seeing some large particle spikes. And this time we're seeing a room with levels of greater than 20 million particles per cubic foot. And just to provide a little context to that, the typical Aircuity demand control ventilation application calls for a maximum air change rate when a room measures 5 million particles per cubic foot higher than the supply air. So in this case, we definitely need to make sure that this spike and this increase in the particle levels in the room was caused by something happening in the room itself and not by any dirty air that was coming in from the outside. So when we go into graphing and exporting and we compare the room to the outside air, we can see that the large spike in the room does occur in sort of the same area as a rise in the outside air, but because the spike itself is so large, it causes the scaling on the y-axis of the graph to really spread itself out. So we don't get a true comparison between the room and the outside air. However, what the Aircuity platform allows us to do is to zoom in on those few hours leading up to the spike to get a true comparison between the two. And so when we do zoom in, we see that as the outdoor air levels rise, there's no change in the room. And at the outdoor air's maximum level, the particles in the room itself are only at about 10% of what they are in the outside air. So using this data, we can feel pretty comfortable in saying that the increased particle levels being measured were caused by an IEQ event taking place in the room itself and not due to a rise in the levels being brought into the room. And once again, we can use this data to prove proper filtration within the building. However, the high particle levels in this room could potentially make it very infectious, perhaps making it a candidate for in-room HEPA filtration as described by the ASHRAE Position paper. And so to determine if it is, what we would want to do is we want to take this data that we're looking at in graphing and exporting between both the room and the outside air, and we're going to extrapolate it out over a much longer period of time. And if we were happening to see more spikes in the room or the room rise up and stay at a higher level of particles, we definitely would want to consider installing an in-room HEPA system and then continuing to monitor the room afterwards is going to verify A, that the system is working, and if it is, B, how long that we need the system to run. Equally as important is that occupants can be easily provided this data that exhibits the healthy conditions of their part of the building as we see here, simply by logging into My Aircuity or by looking at their phone through the Aircuity phone application. In our final example, we've gone back to the dashboard to look at our particle levels, but this time we're noticing that there's a lot more rooms exceeding the threshold that we've set, and all of the rooms are reading pretty close to 6 million particles per cubic foot. And so we definitely need to look into this and investigate it more, because it seems that there's been a large-scale particle event that's taken place throughout the entire building. So now what we do to investigate, we go into graphing and exporting, and we're going to graph our outdoor air particle levels. And now what we see here is that there was a significant rise in those outdoor air levels right up to about 6 million particles per cubic foot, which is pretty much what we saw in that full list of rooms on the dashboard. So now what we want to do is we need to compare the two to see when that spike in the rooms occurred as well. And when we do this, we now see that all the rooms that were on that list in the dashboard have their particle levels track with the outside air. And so this is going to lead us to believe that there's some sort of filtration deficiency that's taking place that needs to be investigated. And what it could be that the building is ventilating past its filtration capacity, that the filter itself is non-functional and needs to be replaced, that there's a leak at the filter assembly that's allowing the particles into the building, or that the filter that's in use is not effective enough and that a filter higher on the MERV scale needs to be installed. In any of these cases, the Aircuity platform has highlighted this filtration issue, and it's going to allow the proper changes to be made to better increase the healthiness of the environment for the building's occupants. And so in summary, the Aircuity analytics can be used to build a data-driven strategy to determine where your optimal outdoor air ventilation rate is and not just throw the dampers wide open. Determine if you have that ability to increase outdoor airflow significantly. Are contaminants entering the building from the outside air? And if they are, at what level? We can also verify filtration performance and provide insight as to if we need to fix, change, or upgrade our filters. And also that we can use this data to inform employees, students, and tenants of buildings about the IEQ, so that way they can have maximum confidence about returning to their buildings. Another point that was related to filtration that ASHRAE mentioned in the position paper was to potentially bypass energy recovery via an enthalpy wheel. And the reason for this seems to be to avoid cross-contamination of infectious aerosols between the exhaust air and the supply air streams. Our recommended solution is to verify that the wheel is sealed correctly and that there's not any air passing between the streams. And to do this, you'd simply add duct probes in the exhaust air and the supply air ducts right at the points that they pass the enthalpy wheels. And you're going to want to look at your particles and TVOCs on both sides. If you see an increase on the exhaust side that corresponds with an increase on the supply side, it's likely going to be a breach in the seal. So analytically, this is how it would look. We'd go into the My Aircuity dashboard, and we'd want to look through our TVOCs and our particle sensors to confirm that we're not seeing any increases on both sides of the wheel. And as you can see, although there were no increases in the TVOC levels, we are seeing increases in the particle levels. So it does appear that there may be some sort of breach in the seal on the wheel, and it might not be sealed properly. And so by using the analytics, it's going to help us further implement those guidelines put forth in the ASHRAE position paper to help maintain an efficient, healthy building, and also point out any deficiencies that we may need to fix to be able to maintain that healthy building as well. Finally, what I want to do is I want to highlight the importance of a healthy building ventilation platform in order to maintain a healthy building environment. So as we saw when we were looking at the particulate levels, we saw spaces that had large particle spikes that were immediately eradicated when the Aircuity system detected those spikes, and we commanded the BMS to increase the airflow to those spaces. And we also saw spaces that had an increase in particle levels but didn't have increased outside air brought in because the outside air was just as dirty. So now what we want to do is let's look at and compare those systems to another site that's only performing IEQ monitoring of the spaces within the building itself and not looking at the outdoor air, supply air, or anything else. So at this site, a simple click on the carbon monoxide section of the Aircuity analytics in the dashboard, and it revealed a large increase of carbon monoxide levels across all the areas within the building, with some rooms getting up near 70 parts per million in their CO levels. At 70 parts per million, individuals can start to experience symptoms such as headache, fatigue, and nausea. So it's evident how serious an event it was that occurred there. And we need to remember that CO, it's a colorless, odorless gas. So until you start to suffer these symptoms, you really have no idea what's happening. However, with a quick look at the analytics, it revealed the problem and also revealed the fix as well, because the customer realized that the carbon monoxide spikes corresponded with their generator testing. And so that obviously they needed to make some changes to prevent the entrainment of CO in their building in the future. However, also as important was when looking at the data over an extended period of time, we can see how slowly the carbon monoxide filtered out of the building itself, as it took well over a week for levels to get back down to 0 ppm. And so although the carbon monoxide in the outside air would have dispersed much sooner, because the Aircuity system wasn't being used to increase airflow into the building because of those high readings, it took much longer to remove the carbon monoxide from the building than if there was a demand control ventilation system in place. And so this really highlights the importance of having a healthy building ventilation platform. And it also demonstrates how using the Aircuity analytics can show the deficiencies of not increasing airflow when an IEQ event occurs inside your building.
Thanks, Anthony. So yeah, so all really powerful and all, easily available on this analytics tool, right? I mean, to discover all four of those situations might have taken, 60 seconds, right? I mean, it's like once you're at that screen, you're just clicking on the category, the specific, and then looking at it, and you have some answers right away. In summary, here's what I get of what Anthony said. It's not about throwing open the dampers and just bypassing energy recovery and throwing all previous strategies completely out the window, right? It is about the end result we want is healthy, clean, correctly humidified air at the user level, at where I'm breathing it. Well, I want effective ventilation per person, right? So as it relates to the particles, we want to minimize these particles to minimize them as a proxy for spreading infectious aerosols. We don't want to give that any more opportunity to spread around the building. So if we are increasing the ventilation at such a rate that we're exceeding the system's ability to filter it, we're making the problem worse, not better. If there are particular rooms that are very bad, we want to spot them right away. We want to know immediately, hey, for some reason, these 5 rooms have high particle counts. I need to put a HEPA filter in those rooms individually or something else. But where exactly do I do that localized HEPA filtration, number one? And number two, how long do I do it for? Easy to use these analytics to find where and when and what the best strategy is to minimize it at those rooms. Really easy to find out if I'm exceeding the system capacity. And then equally as important, do I need to increase the filtration levels of the building? Again, how would I know that? Again, 30 seconds and I'll know exactly if I need to do that or not. As it relates to the bypass of the entropy wheel, I just want to summarize what Anthony said by saying that, yes, initially, the strategy probably is bypass your entropy wheel, right? But will it be that way forever? So when do you start using it again? Is it 3 months? Is it a year? Is it, when? So here we want to use data and analytics to know that it is okay to start using it again, to start easing back into that. And then on that CO, it's the exact same thing. If I'm bringing in max air, what else am I bringing in? If I'm just, continuing to do this. So thanks, Anthony. So in summary, look, so we've been doing this for 20 years. This is our 20th anniversary. We've been all about effectively delivering this healthy ventilation in labs for a long time. We've done it in non-critical space as well, but labs have been a big piece of our business because people recognize the need to look at all these different parameters in that air. So it's our position now that you need to start treating all spaces as critical spaces. Start treating them all just like the labs, that the air in there needs to be understood and controlled by a heck of a lot more than just, carbon dioxide on an old carbon dioxide sensor that may or may not be working, and or an occupancy sensor. We want to emphasize real caution in opening the buildings to full ventilation for all the reasons that we discussed, where you're potentially making the situation worse than it actually is or was, that you're desired to focus on the desired result, which is getting this clean, correctly humidified, healthy air to the people in the building and being able to verify that effective ventilation. And we're just advocating for whatever you do, that a data-driven approach is the best approach. And then I'm going to lay on top of that, the extreme importance of being able to communicate this to the people in the buildings right now is paramount. They want maximum confidence that their space is acceptable and clean and as healthy as it possibly can be.